Welcome to the Reduced Cyber Risk Podcast, May 27th, 2019, episode 38. Welcome to the Reduced Cyber Risk Podcast, where we provide you the training and tools you need to pass the CISSP exam while enhancing your cybersecurity career. Hi, my name is Shon Gerber, and I'm your host for this action-packed, informative podcast. Join me each week as I provide the information you need to grow your cybersecurity knowledge so that you're better prepared to pass the CISSP exam. All right, let's get going. Hey all, this is Shon Gerber again with Reduced Cyber Risk, and hope you have a wonderful week this week. Got some great things planned for you in the CISSP training world. Pretty excited about what's going on in the world today. It can't complain. I'm here in wonderful Kansas, and in Kansas, life is good, except for we've got like 8 gazillion gallons of water constantly raining on us on a daily basis. Typically in Kansas, it's like a drought, and we get little bits of it, but we have gotten so much rain that it is some serious flooding. So other than that, you might hear my sump pump running off in the background, and as I'm down here in my basement recording this episode 38. So let's get started. The CISSP, today we typically talk about and reduce cyber risk. We have 3 aspects that we get into, and it's the CISSP Cybersecurity Integration, CISSP Training, and the exam question. And today we're going to talk about the CISSP certifications being recognized globally and by some big key aspects around some awards. We're also going to get into evidence collection on the CISSP training aspect, and we're going to get into the maintaining files for extended periods and degradation of digital media as it relates to the CISSP exam questions. All right, let's get going. So, in a recent article that came out by SC Media, they would recognize ISC Squared as the industry's best professional certification program of 2019. So this is pretty cool, and the fact that it's integrating the CISSP certification and how important it is within the cybersecurity community as well. The SC awards are considered the big daddy dog awards out there, and they are highly looked upon as industry standards as far as from a testimonial standpoint or from a judging standpoint. I should say that what ends up happening is the judging is done through testimonials, industry assessments, and additional research. They have multiple awards that they're giving out to people, and one of those awards is the Trust Award, which is like the best authentication technology. And they also have another Trust Award that's around best business continuity disaster recovery solutions out there. So they have these various awards that are set up in buckets. So best authentication, best business continuity disaster recovery, and so on and so forth. Well, the CISSP fell under the Professional Awards, which is the best professional certification program. And so this is really a big deal in the fact that it came up as one of the top certification programs out there. So if you're studying for your CISSP, know full well that this is an industry leader as it relates to certifications. And you guys know that, right? You wouldn't be taking the test if you didn't understand that around the CISSP. But it was picked because of the advancements in cybersecurity training and certification. So as we know that I noticed that in April 2018, they made some changes to the ISC Squared made to the CISSP training manual. And what they did was they made changes based on recent technology changes, where the industry is going, IoT, all of those aspects that have, from 2 years ago, or basically I think the last time it was updated was almost 3 years ago, with the last changes, that so much has changed in that period of time that they had to make changes in April of 2018. So again, it's really cool that the ISC Squared is staying on top of that and making changes based on those needs. So they also talked about in this article, and it was in SC Magazine as well as in ISC Squared's blog, but it talked about the annotated income earning potential for a CISSP. Now, this is the average with an individual with the CISSP training is $109,000 US a year. That's pretty substantial. That's the average. So that's nothing to sneeze at by any stretch of the imagination. So obviously that changes based on your geographic location, based on the industry you're in, and there's lots of nuances to that. However, the interesting part about that, though, is that that's $109,000 for having that certification. So you got to really ask yourself, I mean, you get a 4-year degree. I know people that spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a 4-year college degree. And so you just got to ask, that is an incredible aspect. That's $109,000 is the average salary. On monster.com, if you have CISSP annotated, there's over 9,000 job openings just for that kind of certification. 9,000. So it's incredible. And they're saying, that the CIS or the cybersecurity job market within 2021 is going to be around, what was it? I've heard as low as 2.5 to even higher. 2.5 million cybersecurity jobs are going to be open. So just on Monster, there's 9,000 job postings with CISSP in the job that are requirements. That's incredible. So you're in a great field. You're in a great certification study. It's awesome. It's really, really good. The other thing they annotated is that the CISSP is a big influencer with women in cybersecurity as well. So I think that's a great testament to the certification. There's one thing I've noticed being in the IT world is there's not a lot of women in the IT world, but I've noticed in a lot more of the managerial types or the executive positions, it's a great way for women to get into this space. So I think it's a cool aspect around that. So that's a really good point that was taken on the article. Some other notable tidbits was that it was a top certification in 2018. They said it was around 17% recommended as the top certification is the CISSP. One close right behind it, though, is the CCSP, which is the Certified Cloud Security Professional, which was around 15%. So you can see the CISSP and the Cloud Security Professionals are some really big certifications that are highly recommended. So if you're working on your CISSP or you've got that done, I would think it'd probably be good to understand the Certified Cloud Security Professional as well. And that's kind of something I'm going to use as a goal for myself here in the next couple of years to focus on that. Now, the Upwork Skills Index, they basically rank the CISSP as one of the hottest job skills in the U.S. labor market. Okay, so I didn't quite understand this when I read it, but, Upwork is basically a company that allows you to contract out various capabilities. And I've done some stuff on Upwork. It's a really great tool. But what they labeled it as their skills index is that the CISSP is in the hottest market, is one of the hottest job skills to have in the entire U.S. labor market. I mean, that's huge. The entire U.S. labor market is one of the hottest job skills to have. So obviously, if you're listening to this podcast and you're studying for CISSP, you get it. The fact that this is a great certification to have. So that's what's amazing about it. And you'll be able to help with Reduce Cyber Risk. My goal is to help you with that. So we've got things on the site at Reduce Cyber Risk that will help you with studying for your CISSP. But the cool part about what Reduce Cyber Risk does as well is to provide you that back-end training that just once you get the CISSP and you get that certification, we also provide you the skills you need to be successful in the cybersecurity space as a cybersecurity leader and as an executive within this world. So it's pretty amazing what you can get with just having that I say it's small, but having that certification. There's also an article in CNBC about companies are reskilling their workforces and they're turning people into what they want into basically learning different aspects. And the key part about this I thought was really, really amazing is that ISC Squared does this as well through their Professional Development Institute called PDI. If you are a cybersecurity professional and you are a member of ISC Squared, you can have access to their professional course development, and it's about 30 plus courses from GDPR to DevSecOps, you name it, they've got it. And I think it's really important. My wife and I took a little vacation, just a little one-off. We got done with graduation for my 2 children that are going off to college, and so it was like extremely stressful time. Well, we actually ended up going to a bed and breakfast not too far away from us in Marion, Kansas, a tiny little town in the middle of nowhere, but it was an awesome little bed and breakfast. Well, we met a couple there, and this gal is actually the VP for a local community college in Kansas City. And what they're doing, which I think is really cool, is they are offering training for underprivileged individuals that are down in the inner city of Kansas City. And it's really cool because the fact of in Kansas City, there's a population that has to, they basically they call it the working poor, where they're working 2 and 3 jobs, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and working 2 and 3 jobs and trying to basically get by. Well, they're creating training and automation and other aspects that when they come walking out of this training, they can make $40,000, $50,000 a year. Well, the reason I say all that is because the cool part about the CISSP and other certifications, the world has changed where you don't necessarily need a 4-year degree to make some really significant income. And there's lots of opportunities out there for you to learn and get knowledge around cyber, especially in cybersecurity, to be able to take those skills and work for a company and make some really good money to help you and your family. So that's really cool. I thought I was really, my hat's off to them. It's a community college in Kansas City, Missouri, actually Kansas City, Kansas, but I can't remember the name of it to save my life. But I think it's a really cool idea. And so this is what ISC Square is also doing similar, is they're providing other additional courses that you can learn through their PDI program. So it's pretty cool. I think it's pretty nice. All right, so let's roll into my training I got set up for the CISSP training. We're going to focus on Domain 7 of Security Operations, and this is around evidence collection. Evidence collection and handling. There's some key aspects you need to be aware of, and the proper collection of evidence is challenging. Should only be accomplished with professional technicians that have been trained in this space. The reason I say that is if you goof this up, you can run the situation where your evidence could be spoiled and could not be useful as it relates to legal action. So improper handling of evidence will jeopardize your legal case. So it's important that you do this well, and you do it very, very well, honestly. It's best to work with a copy of the evidence and not the original documentation or not the original logs. You don't want to run the risk of messing up your evidence to the point where you can't even use the data anymore. And so you should always deal with a copy. Otherwise, if you start messing with the original, what could end up happening is now you go to court and they realize, you know what, this isn't going to work because you have messed with this data and the evidence, and now we're in a situation where it won't fly in a court of law. So just be careful around that. You also need to have a media, when you're dealing with analyzing your media, you need to understand the identification and extraction of the data, how to do it properly, how to do it from a chain of custody standpoint, how to ensure that the data is not messed with and it is consistent and solid for your case. This also deals with magnetic media, optical media, and memory as well. It's just very important that you understand how to get the data out of these individual systems. And that's why a third party that does this for a living is extremely important to probably bring them online when you're dealing with trying to collect your evidence from an event that may have occurred. Also, as it deals with network analysis, it really depends on the prior knowledge of the event, and you need to understand the logs, where these come from, your intrusion prevention systems, your flow logs, your firewalls, all of these different logs that are out there and available to you. You need to make sure that you have these properly brought in, you're analyzing them in a proper way, and then you also understand the software analysis around it, looking for backdoors, logic bombs, or other vulnerabilities that may be out there for you within your company. So it's important that you analyze these and you look for all of those situations that may affect your company. You may need to review the log files of the application for a better picture, and it's important that you get into the application specifically as well. But that comes down to understanding what are the different software that's in your environment. You need to really understand where the accident potentially, the event actually occurred, what systems were affected, and this does include to the application. Now, ideally, applications will have logs. Not all applications do. Newer applications do provide a lot of logging for them, but the older ones, in many cases, didn't have that. So it's important that you understand your environment to be able to get the application logs so that you can file these in the event that there's an incident. You also need to look at your hardware and embedded device analysis. This deals with computers, phones, tablets, you name it. And you may have to require expert consultants with necessary expertise to help you in that. I know of third parties that bring in very specific software to help with analyzing specific phones, iPads, and other mobile type devices. Especially when you start getting into encryption, that becomes a very challenging aspect to be able to understand what is in those systems and how is the data in there being structured. So it's important that you bring on third parties. It really is. I would not try this yourself, especially if you're in the event that you are dealing with an actual incident. Again, I'm not a lawyer. Don't just take it for what it's worth, but I would highly recommend you bringing in a third party, especially if you're dealing with some sort of legal action. Reporting and documentation, some key objectives on this is that all investigations need to have a report, and this report type will be extremely dependent upon your organization's policies and procedures. You have to have these defined and documented. If you have them documented and defined, that's an awesome place to be. You now can be in a situation where you can use these documents and you can tie the legal action back to them. If you don't have these documented, you really put you in a precarious position as it relates to legality-wise to be able to justify, especially if it's an employee going, well, they violated my acceptable use policy. Well, do you have one? Well, not really. Well, then they can't really violate an acceptable use policy. So there's a final report also lays down the foundations for potential legal action. You really have to have that in place to help you with your legal moves. You also need to have a strong relationship with your legal counsel. It should be established prior to doing any of this, and especially before an incident, you should have a strong relationship with legal. And you also should build a relationship with law enforcement. Now, I recommend that you contact and talk to your legal and your compliance folks around before you contact law enforcement, and this should be done before you have an incident. The reason I say that is that there's maybe particular ways, and I'm not saying don't contact law enforcement, not saying that at all, but you need to contact your CEO or your main leaders within your company to make sure that the communication that you provide to law enforcement is accurate and to the point. You need to make sure that they have given some level of conversation around that. And you may not, as a security person, even be the person that would communicate with law enforcement. It may be someone within your legal branch that would deal with that. But you need to reach out to legal counsel before you have an incident to understand who's responsible for conducting and talking to law enforcement. You may already have this relationship, I don't know, but it's something to research and understand. These introductions are very valuable and important, especially after an event would occur. Investigative techniques, its key point about this is that you need to really conduct a computer's investigations. You need a team to do this. And again, I can't stress enough bringing in a third party unless you have specifically spelled that out within ROEs or I should say RRNEs, which are your roles, responsibilities, and expectations of someone within your organization. If they have that, if you have that capability, great. But ideally, a third party can really help you with these techniques and these investigations. You need to operate under an incident response policy. It's highly recommended that you have a policy in place and you follow that policy as it relates to incidents. This is where the rules of engagement should be properly defined. When do you bring in law enforcement? When do you bring in public affairs? When do you contact legal? So on and so forth. All of that stuff should be done. How do you question employees? Can you question employees? All of those ROEs should be defined before you have to deal with an investigation. So that it's a big aspect you need to consider as it relates to, one, the CISSP test, and two, focusing on protecting your company. As you're gathering evidence, there are three options. There's voluntary surrender, subpoena, and search warrant. Under voluntary surrender, will provide evidence based on a request. So people will volunteer to give you the information for your or for whatever the investigation is. That may or may not happen, just depends. A subpoena would be a court order by law enforcement would say we need this information, and then therefore they must provide sufficient notice. As you're getting within the various governments, with the Chinese, the EU, you need to keep some of these log data for a period of time. Some may be 30 days, some may be 6 months, but you need to be aware of that because law enforcement may come to you and say, we need this information, and you need to be able to provide it. Saying that I don't have it, well, is not a good answer. As it relates to search warrant, this is limited only in situations where evidence is needed immediately. The judge may say, I need this as credible evidence and I'm worried about it being destroyed or lost. They then will go ahead and issue a search warrant at that point in time. Again, these are based on U.S. laws, and your laws may differ based on the country you're in, but this is typically how the evidence is gathered. All right, so we're going to roll into the CISSP exam questions. And a couple of the questions, I kind of started off with a little bit different avenue, focusing on legal requirements and then also on more or less the hardware or / the media requirements, the physical devices themselves. And one of the first questions is going to be is what is the highest potential risk for keeping log files from your computer and network devices within your environment? So basically, why do you keep them? Second one is compact discs, otherwise known as CDs, and DVDs, data video discs, do not degrade over time and are considered safe for long-term storage of data. So those are the two questions, focused on log files of storing them and also for what is the protection of the DVDs and CDs. So question 1, we'll come back and readdress it. What is the highest potential risk for keeping log files from computer and network devices within your environment? So letter A, subject to legal discovery. Letter B, consume large amounts of storage. Letter C, continuous increasing storage costs. And then D, none of the above. All right, so that's question 1. Question 2, compact discs and DVDs, or otherwise known as data video discs, do not degrade over time and are considered safe for long-term storage of data. True or false? Let's find out. Okay, so as you're dealing with the log files and maintaining log files within your environment, there are lots of reasons not to keep log files too long. And really what it comes down to is that the log files themselves need to be kept for a period of time to help you from a breach environment. But the longer you keep these log files, they do take up storage. The cost of actually storage is going down, so it's not really going up, but they do take up storage, and that does increase cost. And for keeping log files, even though they are flat files, which means they're very small, the cost does continue to climb and does cost a lot of money. So you really need to understand what is important and should you be keeping those files and how long should you be keeping those files. And typically there's also regulatory requirements that may force you to keep them for anywhere from 30, 90, maybe even 6 months of, it's 180 days, right? Yeah, okay, yeah. Third grade education at large, it's 180 days. You may have to keep them for that period of time. But keeping them longer than that, honestly, is just wasteful unless you have some sort of requirement that you have to do that. However, the best explanation, which is always the way these work on the CISSP exams, is it's subject to legal discovery. So now when you're dealing with the various aspects around your log files, if you keep log files for a period of time, they can be reliable for legal discovery, which means if you get sued, you're going to have to turn those things over. Now, is that a bad thing? Maybe, maybe not. However, having log files on file that are just sitting out there, all kinds of things can go bad with this. So I say that also from a security guy who says you need to have log files because without the log files, it's really hard to catch the bad guy. But you need to make sure that you have a proper plan in place on how to deal with those specific files. You don't want to keep them too long, but you want to keep them long enough. So it's like the answer, it depends. Now for question 2, as it relates to CDs and DVDs. B, false, is the answer. Why is that? Well, CDs and DVDs will degrade over time, and they are not a good storage media for long periods of time. Which reminds me, I've got some DVDs sitting in a safety deposit box, which have probably turned to dust right now. So that's the interesting part about DVDs and CDs. But we're going to get into this real quick, some additional scenario training around CDs and DVDs to kind of give you a little bit more background around it and why they do degrade over time. So the scenario basically comes down to is you've got a bunch of CDs that are sitting in a box in your office, and they're got all kinds of data on them, right? And you're thinking, well, if I just keep these rascals for the next 5,000 years, they'll be just fine. Nothing's going to happen. Well, that isn't necessarily the case, and this has actually been a really interesting study for me. I was not aware of all this. I knew they degraded, but I didn't really realize to what extent they degraded and why they degraded. So a CD, like your data CD, and in the past, these used to have a lot more data on them. Now people just put this stuff on DVDs. But the CD, the compact disc, it's basically it's a lacquer and aluminum and plastic all wrapped into one. Sounds quite tasty. No, not really. But basically what it is, it's an aluminum sheet, and it's got lacquer that is a protective coating on the front of it. And this reflective aspect, when the laser reads it, is what ends up having kicks back what that data is, right? So that 1s and 0. But this lacquer, this front face of this, on this plastic disc, this lacquer is very soft, and it also will erode over time. And not erode by water standpoint, but what it does is it reacts to oxygen, sulfur, and scratching. And when you scratch these DVDs, you now break through that lacquer finish. And when you break through that finish, the aluminum will oxidize really, really quickly. And it's one of those things where it'll actually end up making your CD worthless over a very quick period of time. So the one thing they wanted to point out, I got this from Wikipedia, is that each type of optical disc has different susceptibility. Yes, I can't do my third grade education. Susceptibility. There you go. That's it. Took me a second or two. And so therefore they will range in what the effects from these different outside environments. Discs made of gold are less vulnerable, but they're also way more expensive. And having a gold disc is for music artists, not for DVD people, sort of, kind of, not really. Okay, moving on. And then there's how do you get signs? And they call it disc rot. What'll happen is as time goes on, these things will start to show their age, and then these will have holes and several pinprick holes that will sit inside that you can actually look right through the CD itself. So those are considerations for you as you're looking at CDs and whether or not you should keep the data on there for a long period of time. Now, as it relates to DVDs, these are a different structure from the CD in of themselves, and they have a plastic disc over the reflective layer instead of lacquer. So these things will last longer. Now, again, same thing. It will vary from company to company and from DVD to DVD, but you need to look at that and be considering which is the best option for you. And if you are putting your stuff on CDs, don't consider it a long-term solution. Just don't. So the big point around that is that DVDs would probably be better than CDs, but you should consider other storage options when you're dealing with anything of worth any value for you. All right, so here's the links. ISC Squared Training Guide, SC Magazine. We got some great stuff there about the awards that CISSP is getting. ISC Squared Information Security Certifications Training as well. Kind of, we talked about the stuff that we've given you on around the CISSP training. And then finally, Wikipedia. All right. Hope you have a great day. Check me out online at Reduce Cyber Risk. You love it. Great stuff out there for you. And I hope to catch you on the flip side. See ya. Thanks so much for joining me today on my podcast. If you like what you heard, please leave a review on iTunes, as I would greatly appreciate your feedback. Also, check out my CISSP videos that are on YouTube. Just search for Shon, that's S-H-O-N, Gerber, and you'll find a plethora of content to help you pass the CISSP exam. Lastly, head over to Reduce Cyber Risk and look at the cornucopia of free CISSP materials available to all my email subscribers. Thanks again for listening. See ya.